For the Sake of My Children, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel narrates the life story of an Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi man. Then she converted to Islam, married her Arab lover, and traveled with him to the Islamic world. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on a true love affair between a former Christian girl and a Muslim immigrant. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 7. Irshad challenges the mandatory female genital mutilation for her Muslim daughter. In that abusive home, the Australian girl Irshad somehow managed to live for 3 years with her Saudi husband, Mustafa, in Dammam City. During those years, she hardly knew or saw anything about the outside world. She was imprisoned in the 4 corners of the matrimonial jail. She does not have a computer or internet to connect her to the outside world. She has no means of entertainment except a small TV. This TV is not connected to any satellite channels or the internet. Her husband deliberately refused to subscribe to any internet or cable company. She has no radio or telephone. Mustafa has a mobile phone that he carries in his pocket for 24 hours as if he is wearing a watch. During those 3 years, Irshad became pregnant 4 times but was only able to give birth to 2 children. She miscarried twice when her husband hit her and kicked her in the stomach. She is always expecting a child. Since the couple married in Australia, not a year has gone by without the enslaved wife bearing the child of her Arab master. There are too many sad events in the life of the abused Australian wife to be mentioned, but since similar incidents have been mentioned briefly in the preceding chapters, we must ignore them and mention other types of mistreatment of women. Suffice it to say, his English girlfriend Juliet did not enjoy her married life and did not achieve what she expected from the crazy Arab lover case. The other thing that happened and turned her miserable married life into hell was when her Muslim husband married a second wife who was 9 years younger than her and 14 years younger than him. The new wife was 14 years old, and her husband was 28 when he took her as a second Muslim wife. As usual, when the Australian wife protested, she was silenced by a verse from the Holy Quran, which legalized polygamy. Marry as many women as are pleasing to you, 2, 3, or 4. Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 3. Irshad already knew that in Islam a man can have up to 4 wives at the same time, but while in Australia, she was told that there must be a strong reason for marrying a second, a third, or a 4th woman. The wife of the Pakistani imam in Sydney told her that if the first Muslim wife could not have children or had a disease that prevented her from having sex or something like that, then the Muslim husband could keep her and marry another woman besides her. Accordingly, she objected to the second marriage of her Arab husband because there was no legal reason for that. At first, the husband tried to convince his first wife that what the imam's wife had said to her in Australia was not true, and when she refused to accept the justification, the matter led to a serious quarrel between the two and beating and eventually resulted in the second divorce of Irshad. The uncle intervened again and prevented the final separation between the 2 lovers for the sake of the children. However, the second divorce has been counted against the Australian wife. So, their marital relationship after that became one final divorce pending. Mustafa spends most of his time with his young Saudi wife, while the Australian wife is left alone with the responsibility of raising her 4 young children. She did not see the new wife for a long time after her husband married her. One day, Irshad is invited by her husband's relatives to attend a wedding. The husband first led his new young wife to the house where the marriage ceremony was about to take place. then came and brought his old wife Ershad and her 4 children. This is the derogatory name that the first wife is called after the second marriage of her husband. It is the most humiliating experience for Ershad when she sees her Muslim husband's second wife for the first time. The second wife is 15 years old, and yet she became pregnant by Mustafa, and she was in her 7th month. Instead of hating and despising her, the Australian wife felt pity for her. She concluded that she is one of the thousands of underage women or minor girls who are victims of female child marriage, which is permitted by the Holy Quran and supported by the hadiths of the Prophet, Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4. The authentic hadiths say the Messenger of Allah married his child bride Aisha when she was 6 years old and began to have sex with her when she reached 9 years of age. Therefore, the Australian wife felt that she would be as guilty as her polygamous Arab husband if she hated a female child who had been abused by the teachings of misogyny in Islam. Nothing is more extraordinary than what we mentioned about Mustafa's 2 families in Saudi Arabia except for an unexpected catastrophe that occurred shortly after the second marriage took place. What a pity! The new wife didn't enjoy, or rather wasn't harmed by her abusive marriage with the polygamous husband for more than a few months. During giving birth to her firstborn baby, the child's wife died. Her sudden premature death is not natural but due to negligence. The wife of 15 was supposed to be taken to the hospital when her midwife was unable to help her deliver her first child. The midwife informed the husband Mustafa that his young wife Iman could not give birth naturally and therefore she was needed to be rushed to the hospital for cesarean surgery. The husband refused to send his second wife to the hospital for fear of revealing her nakedness in front of a foreign doctor. Most government hospitals in Saudi Arabia usually have Muslim male doctors from countries like Egypt, Pakistan, and Sudan. Other private hospitals are extremely expensive and have doctors and nurses from Western countries. Either way, no Saudi man would agree to allow these male doctors to reveal the private parts of his wife, no matter how precarious her health condition is. There is a famous case of a Sudanese male Muslim doctor who performed a cesarean operation on a pregnant Saudi wife against her Arab husband's wishes. When the Saudi husband complained to the Minister of Health in Riyadh City, the Sudanese doctor was dismissed from his post, deported out of the kingdom within 24 hours, blacklisted, and permanently banned from returning to Saudi Arabia. Even if he wanted to perform the rituals of the Hajj pilgrimage, he wasn't allowed to return to the holy soil of the Islamic sacred cities of Mecca and Medina. The death of the second wife Iman is sad news and not good news for the first wife Ershad. She knew that the sudden death of the young wife was caused by her fanatical husband. Despite this, she could not utter a word of condemnation against her dangerous husband. In her heart, she hoped that her Muslim husband would not go to a third Muslim wife. A few months after the death of the second wife, another tragedy occurred in the Australian family. By this time, the first wife, Ershad, is expecting a 5th child. She already has 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. Now, her first 2 children are just over 3 and 4 years old. One day, the Saudi husband informed his Australian wife that his uncle had asked him to circumcise their first son and first daughter. Despite being beaten and attempted murder by her husband when she protested the Prophet Muhammad's teachings on female genital mutilation, the Australian woman told her Saudi husband she would never allow her daughter to be circumcised. According to her, such an evil practice against female children is euphemistically called the good sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. She also said that she did not mind the circumcision of her son. This time, rather than fight with her, the Saudi husband took the matter to his uncle. The uncle lectured him first about the disadvantages of marrying a foreign woman. Then he called a family meeting and brought with him a few old women who were relatives of Mustafa. These elderly ladies had lectured Ershad about the great danger of raising an uncircumcised daughter in a Muslim society. Mustafa works as a translator between his aunts and his foreign wife. According to them, the uncircumcised girl would grow into a wild girl resembling a forest beast and thus would be difficult to tame later on. Such an uncircumcised girl would be dangerous to her family and society, and would surely fall into the sin of adultery and bring great shame upon her father. Circumcision helps a girl control herself. In general, Muslims believe that when a circumcised girl reaches her teens, she will not be able to indulge in sex even if she wanted to. Any circumcised girl who tries to indulge in sex will experience unbearable pain and feel as if she is being raped. This is the main reason for performing this procedure, to prevent her from having premarital sex. Therefore, female genital mutilation or circumcision of girls aims to control women's sexuality and eliminate their desire for the opposite sex. In this line of thinking, there is a belief among Muslims that an uncircumcised girl called Galfa can easily give in to her sexual desire. Even if her underwear rubs or scratches her genitals, she will feel an uncontrollable sexual desire, and nothing will mitigate her desire to masturbate or fornicate. As they say, this is simply not the case for a circumcised girl. She is always in control of her sexuality, and it is exceedingly difficult to arouse her sexually. Due to the small opening created in her genitals after circumcision, a purified girl is always considered a virgin. Muslim men believe that a circumcised girl is more sexually pleasurable than an uncircumcised girl because she has a small, tight, and stitched pussy. As they believe, a Muslim girl who has been genitally mutilated has a small, sewn, tight, compressed, zipped, zapped, and completely closed-up pussy with a hole smaller than the eye of a needle, while an uncircumcised infidel girl has a pussy as big as the mouth of a whale. Then the elderly Saudi women supported their argument with the hadith of the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace. Circumcision is a sunnah for men and a preservation of honor for women, Sunan Abu Dawud. According to the Prophet Muhammad, circumcision helps a girl maintain her chastity and protect the honor of her family. It is the state of abstinence from premarital, extramarital, and all other forms of sex, including masturbation and watching porn videos on the internet. Moreover, these elderly Muslim women believe that those extra parts of a girl's vagina, such as the labia majora, labia minora, and the entire clitoris, which the circumciser has to remove during circumcision, besides being a source of great sexual temptation for the uncircumcised infidel girl, have ill effects, extremely into marriage. According to the belief of Muslims, these parts emit an unpleasant odor that kills the sexual desire of the husband during intercourse. The Australian wife Irshad refused to believe such a nonsense theory on the grounds that she herself was never circumcised and nothing of the sort is attached to her genitals. She said that her Saudi husband Mustafa did not mention on any day that he smelled a foul odor emanating from her genitals during sex with her. When these elderly women failed to persuade the uncircumcised white woman whom they call Al-Galfa to agree to the circumcision of her 5-year-old daughter, her Saudi husband decided to continue the religious observance against his Australian wife's wishes. His decision was supported by his uncle and was appreciated by the old women. Therefore, the little girl Aisha was forcibly separated from her Australian mother Irshad and taken to the home of the first wife of Mustafa's uncle and had her genitals mutilated on the same day. The brutal circumcision performed on her daughter against her desire for the Australian wife created much resentment against her Arab husband and his Muslim relatives and caused untold turmoil in her mind. For more than 2 weeks, Irshad does not know where they took her little girl and what happened to her. When the daughter returned, her mother couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the ugly scars mutilating her little girl's genitals. The young daughter's small vagina was mutilated and closed from top to bottom, leaving only a small opening for her to use while urinating. When she grows up and gets married, that little hole won't allow her husband to insert his little finger into her tightly circumcised and groped pussy on the first wedding night. Therefore, it would be impossible to have sex with her. Only a painful rape could enable him to force his large cock inside her small and tight pussy and torture her to death. Often, these genital mutilated brides were taken to hospital for profuse bleeding or had surgeries to enlarge their private parts so that grooms could have sex with them. What a pity, the circumcised girl will have a dead pussy and therefore not enjoy sex. Having sex for her would be a very traumatic experience and make her feel like she was raped. Therefore, for the first time since her marriage to Mustafa, Irshad decided to leave him and return to her country. However, she does not want to leave her 4 children in that backward and primitive Islamic society. However, she faced the unsurmountable problem of escaping from Saudi Arabia without her husband's knowledge. She understood that the consequences would be dire if she were caught trying to escape with her young children. To travel abroad, she needs passports for her children. Irshad also knew that in Saudi Arabia a passport cannot be issued to a child without the consent of his or her father. However, another difficulty she faced was that it was against the law in a Muslim country for a woman to travel outside the country without being accompanied by her husband or a male relative known as Muhram. It is worth emphasizing that the Mahram is a man who is forbidden to marry or have sex with him, such as her father, brother, grandfather, or adult son. In this regard, the Prophet Muhammad said, "It is not permissible for a Muslim woman to travel during the day or at night without a Mahram." Accordingly, the escape of Irshad from Saudi Arabia with her 4 children is impossible. However, the Australian wife decided to take a risk and contact her Australian embassy in Riyadh City. She expected the embassy to understand her unsurmountable problem and help her return to her country with her 4 children. She has no phone call or other means of contacting her embassy. Her husband has a mobile phone, but he never leaves it behind when he goes out. Every time he went out, he would lock her and her children inside the apartment. Many times in the past, the Arab husband spent a few days with his late Saudi underage wife and left his Australian wife and children locked inside their apartment. It seemed like he was not bothering about whether his family members would be burned alive in the event of a fire or bleed to death in the event of an accident. After many days of contemplating her escape, Irshad found a glimmer of hope. She knows an African woman who lives in the building next door. Although the Australian wife and that African woman had never personally met or spoken to each other, the 2 foreign ladies developed a very strange kind of friendship. Irshad always stands by her window and looks out at the outside world. This window is her only means of glimpsing the outside world and watching the crowded street below the tall building in which she is imprisoned. She can also see the building next door at the height of the building she lives in. In an apartment in that building next door, one day she saw a black woman as young as her age. The black African woman seemed to be in the same position as the white Australian wife. She always stands by her window and stares out at the busy street below. One day, Irshad saw the African woman looking at her and smiling at her. She responded by smiling and greeting her. The woman waved her hand to her. From that time on, the 2 women became friendly and kept waving and smiling at each other. The Australian wife decided to send a message to the African woman and ask for her help. She knows that in a strict society like Saudi Arabia, no one can step between a husband and his wife without putting himself in big trouble. So, she decided to seek the help of that woman without letting her know about her escape plan. She pretended to be in trouble and needed quick help. She did this by setting some newspapers on fire and letting the other woman see the flames and smoke in her apartment. Then Irshad started running around her apartment, calling for help. The African woman quickly responded and called the police. Soon after, Irshad heard a heavy knock on her door. She responded by telling the police that her apartment was locked and the keys were with her Saudi husband. Her door has quickly been broken down and some firefighters and policemen rushed into her apartment. When these Arab men entered, they discovered that the white woman had already succeeded in putting out the fire. They left immediately without condemning the Saudi husband who imprisoned his foreign wife and her children. Irshad understood that she had a few hours before her husband returned from work. Therefore, she decided to implement her escape plan once the police and firefighters left her apartment. But then, the Australian wife recalled that she is not allowed to leave her apartment without being accompanied by a male relative, Mahram, or her Saudi husband. If she dares to do so, she will be caught by the correctional police and will be brutally flogged on her back and buttocks. To avoid such dire problems, the smart white girl went to her black African friend's apartment and asked her to let her use her phone. After her friend gave her permission, Irshad used the phone book and called the Australian embassy in Riyadh. Fortunately, the African lady happened to be a Sudanese woman who did not know any language other than Arabic. Then the Australian wife, crying, explained to her embassy her dire situation in Saudi Arabia and the persecution and violations she is going through. The embassy told her that her unsurmountable problem is common among white women married to Saudi men. Despite this, the embassy said it is ready to help her return to her country, but it cannot issue passports for her 4 children because the law in Saudi Arabia does not allow her to do so without the consent of their Muslim father. Irshad told her embassy that she did not want to travel to her country without her children. She can never let her 4 children grow up in such a primitive and backward society and among those abusive men who love to marry underage girls under the pretext of the marriage of female children that is permissible in Islam. In this case, the embassy said it could do nothing to help her. The foreign wife has become extremely disappointed when the Australian embassy showed its inability to help her escape with her 4 children. When Irshad realized that her embassy could not help her escape with her children, she shared her unsurmountable problem with the Sudanese lady. Because of the language barrier, with great difficulty, the Australian wife, in her broken Arabic, explained her unbeatable problem to her new friend. Salwa is her new friend's name. She is a newly married young woman. Her husband is also Sudanese. She suggested that the Australian wife must contact the nearest United Nations office or human rights organization or women's rights group and ask for their help. Irshad liked the idea and asked Salwa to keep her in her home with her children. The kind African woman gladly agreed to take in her Australian friend and her 4 children. When Salwa's husband returned from work and finds out about the white girl's invincible problem, he promised to help her as well. Meanwhile, when the Saudi husband Mustafa came home and did not find his Australian wife and their 4 children in his apartment, he immediately called his uncle. His uncle told him that he should report to the Dammam police and file a complaint against his Australian wife. The uncle guessed correctly that the foreign wife ran away with her 4 children. He also told Mustafa that his wife was likely planning to travel to the Australian embassy in Riyadh City. Accordingly, the uncle asked his nephew to stop her before she could reach the Saudi capital city. The husband followed his uncle's advice and reported the matter to the police. He stated in his complaint that his Australian wife ran away from her home and kidnapped his 4 Saudi children. The police issued an arrest warrant for Irshad Al-Shamari, who was previously known as Susan Peterson before converting to Islam and marrying a Muslim man. Mustafa reported using her former Christian name to the police because he expected his Australian wife to use it to hide her new identity. A nationwide search was conducted by the Dammam police. For 3 days, the Saudi police were unable to find the fugitive white woman and her 4 children. On the 4th day, and through a thorough investigation, the Dammam police were able to trace the phone call made by Mrs. Salwa Ahmed Al-Sudania from her apartment when she saw that the apartment of the white Australian woman, Irshad, was on fire. The Arab police officers surprised the hiding foreign wife and the Sudanese couple in their apartment. The runaway Australian wife was immediately handcuffed and taken into police custody for further interrogation. Similarly, the African wife Salwa Ahmed and her Sudanese husband Rashid Ali were arrested on charges of conspiring with a married foreign woman and hiding her and her 4 children from her Saudi husband in their apartment. As a result, the children of the Australian wife were taken from her and returned to their Arab father. When the Saudi husband, Mustafa, learned that his Australian wife, Irshad, was planning to kidnap his 4 children and run away from him, he divorced her for the 3rd time. According to Islamic law, this 3rd divorce is the final one, thus ending forever the abusive marital life between the foreign white wife Irshad and her Arab husband Mustafa.